Welcome to the All Sorts Podcast. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
Today, it's Alfred Nobel. Everyone knows him because of those famous prizes, but
There's a whole lot more to him than that, believe me.
we're going deep, folks. Got biographies, stuff from the Nobel Prize website itself.
It's going to be a journey.
Our mission: uncover the man behind all those medals and discoveries. Who was Alfred Nobel?
Right. Beyond the legend, the human side.
Exactly. What surprises are waiting for us? I'm excited to find out.
Me too.
Yeah.
Honestly, when you think Nobel Prizes, you picture someone, almost saintly, right?
Yeah, you do.
But Nobel's story, it's way more complicated, full of contradictions. This guy built a fortune on explosives.
He explodes, yeah.
Yeah. But at the same time, he really wanted to leave behind a legacy of peace and progress.
Now that's fascinating. Okay, so where do we even begin with a life like this?
Let's go way back to the beginning. His family is anything but ordinary. Picture this. His dad, Emmanuel Nobel, was an engineer. But not just any engineer. This guy supplied weapons to the Tsar of Russia.
Whoa, hold on. Supplying weapons to the Tsar. That's not your average dad's job.
Nope, not at all. Talk about a high-stakes family business, right?
Absolutely. Did that have any influence on Alfred's belief, do you think?
You bet it did. Huge influence. The family moved to St. Petersburg when Alfred was just a kid, 9 years old, in 1842. By the time he was 17, get this, fluent in 5 languages: Swedish, Russian, French, English, and German.
Wow. 5 languages by 17. I struggled with just Spanish in high school.
It's amazing. This upbringing, all these languages, different cultures, totally shaped his thinking, opened him up to the world.
I could only imagine. So did young Alfred follow in his dad's engineering footsteps then?
Here's the twist. His dad pushed him towards science, for sure, but Alfred, he was drawn to literature, poetry, loved it.
Really?
It's amazing when you think about it. That early passion kind of foreshadows the whole Nobel Prize thing, doesn't it?
You're right. It shows he wasn't just a science guy. Much broader interests.
Uh-huh.
Hold on. He didn't stay in Russia his whole life, did he?
Nope. He ended up studying chemistry in Paris. Now, Paris in those days, a hub of intellectual and cultural life.
Oh, yeah. I can picture it. The City of Lights.
And that's not all. He also spent time in the United States working with John Erickson.
John Erickson.
That's
the inventor.
the one and only, the brilliant mind behind the USS Monitor, that crazy ironclad warship from the Civil War.
Oh, wow. An ironclad warship. That must have been cutting-edge tech back then.
Absolutely groundbreaking. All these experiences, the languages, the cultures, the technologies had a huge impact on him, shaped him,
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Yeah.
So we've got this super diverse background, but how did he go from that to dynamite? That's got to be a story.
It is. Buckle up. It starts with, a bit of a downturn. After the Crimean War, the family business not doing so well.
Mm-hmm.
So Alfred and his dad turned their attention to nitroglycerin.
Nitroglycerin.
Huh?
As in the highly explosive stuff.
That's it. Incredibly dangerous, but powerful. They wanted to use it for construction, mining, things like that.
But dangerous, as you said. And that danger, it hit home for Alfred, didn't it?
Tragically so. His younger brother, Emil, died in a nitroglycerin explosion in 1864.
Oh, that's awful.
Just devastating. And it really fueled Alfred's determination to find a safer way to control nitroglycerin. He wanted to make sure nobody else had to go through that kind of loss.
Yeah. So it wasn't just scientific curiosity for him, was it?
No way. It was deeply personal, driven by this tragedy. And that drive led him to, you guessed it, dynamite.
Dynamite. So he was trying to tame this incredibly dangerous substance. How did that go?
Years of risky experiments, can you imagine? But finally, in 1867, he nails it, patents dynamite, way more stable than nitroglycerin, and he invents the blasting cap, too, so you can control the detonation.
A game changer, I bet.
Oh, yeah, utterly revolutionary.
We always hear about dynamite, but I never really thought about how it changed things. Can you paint a picture for us?
Imagine this. Construction projects that seemed impossible, suddenly doable. Tunnels blasted through mountains, railroads stretching across continents, huge canals dug efficiently. Dynamite reshaped the world's infrastructure.
It's mind-blowing. And to think, it came from such a personal, tragic place.
It highlights the two sides of his work, doesn't it? Creation and, the potential for destruction.
It does. And dynamite wasn't his only invention, was it? I mean, this guy was prolific.
Oh, you have no idea. Dynamite was just the start. He goes on to invent gelignite, even safer than dynamite, and ballistite, an early form of smokeless gunpowder.
Smokeless gunpowder. like what they use today.
Well, it's a precursor to what they use today, even in rocket propellants. Crazy, right? Something from the 1800s still helping us get into space.
Incredible. Makes you wonder what else he could have come up with given more time. I heard he had tons of patents.
He did. 355 patents to his name. Artificial silk, synthetic rubber, you name it, he was trying it. Never stopped.
This guy's curiosity was off the charts. Okay, so we've got this brilliant inventor changing the world with explosives. But then there's the Nobel Prizes. How does a guy who made his fortune from, well, things that blow up become the symbol of peace?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And that's where things get really interesting. But that, my friend, is a story for part 2 of our deep dive. So, dynamite to peacemaker, right? Quite the turnaround.
It really is. How do we make sense of that?
Well, there's this story, might be a bit of a legend, but it goes that Nobel read his own obituary, or at least what he thought was his obituary.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of this. A newspaper messed up, right?
Exactly. They accidentally published it, and they labeled him, get this, the Merchant of Death.
Ouch. Talk about a wake-up call.
Yeah.
I mean, to read your own obituary with that headline.
Right. And supposedly it really hit him hard, made him think, what's my life's work? What am I leaving behind?
He was already super wealthy. His inventions had changed things, but
It's like he's thinking, is this how I want to be remembered?
it makes you think, even when you achieve great things.
There can be those unintended consequences, those shadows.
Exactly. So, did he decide to change that narrative? Were the Nobel Prizes his answer to that?
It's hard to say for sure, but it's a pretty powerful theory. In his will, he dedicated most of his fortune to these prizes to recognize those who, quote, conferred the greatest benefit to humankind.
And the categories, they're so interesting. Physics, chemistry, physiology, or medicine, literature, and peace.
It's like he wanted to cover everything, right? Science, art, working towards peace.
It really does. But that Peace Prize, especially considering his background, it's almost like he was trying to, make amends or something.
It's striking, that's for sure. Recognizing the value of peacemaking when you've, invented dynamite.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, was he trying to balance things out in a way?
Maybe. Acknowledging that progress isn't just about, tech or science, but about how we live together peacefully.
Okay, but let's talk about that Peace Prize for a second. I know someone pretty important influenced that decision, right?
You're talking about Bertha von Suttner, I bet.
That's the one. She was incredible, and she actually won the Nobel Peace Prize herself later on in 1905. But what was their connection?
Well, Bertha was a huge peace activist, an author, and her relationship with Nobel, it was complicated but impactful.
They were friends, or...
It was more like they had this long correspondence, letters back and forth, debating, force, pacifism, the rise of militarism in Europe. Pretty wild to picture the dynamite guy talking about peace with a leading pacifist.
It's almost like they were total opposites, but united by this concern for the future. Do you think those conversations shaped the Peace Prize directly?
It's tough to say, but she definitely challenged his thinking, exposed him to new ways of seeing things. Bertha was a strong voice for peace, no doubt about it, and her influence on Nobel, undeniable.
And she won the Nobel Peace Prize just a few years after he died.
Yeah.
It's almost like, a tribute to their connection and the work they both believed in.
I like that, yeah. It shows how people, even from different worlds, can influence each other, make a real difference. But back to the other prizes for a sec. Have they always been the same categories?
Good question. I actually heard that the Economics Prize wasn't part of the original lineup.
You're right. It's a bit of a later addition.
Why was that?
Sweden's central bank established it in 1968 as a sort of tribute to Nobel.
Okay.
But some people argue that it's not a true Nobel Prize because, it wasn't what Nobel himself had in mind.
So still causing a stir all these years later. I guess that shows their power, right?
For sure. The Nobel Prizes made us think, debate, what is the greatest benefit to humankind? It's not always a simple answer.
Not at all. But now I'm curious about Alfred Nobel, the person. We've talked about his inventions, the prizes, all that. But who was he?
Well, he was a complicated guy. Rich, traveled the world, but also kind of lonely, melancholic, never married, no kids, struggled with health issues his whole life.
It's a reminder that success, the outward kind, doesn't always equal happiness.
Mm-hmm.
It makes you wonder, if he could see the impact of the prizes today, what would he think? Would he be satisfied?
We'll never know, but we can say the prizes have had a massive effect. spotlighting incredible discoveries, acts of courage, art that moves people.
And it's not just about the specific achievements, right? It's the idea behind them.
Like the irony of it all. This guy who got rich from explosives is now the name behind prizes for peace and progress.
Powerful message, yeah. Shows how people can change, how good can come from unexpected places.
We've talked a lot about science, but I remember reading that Nobel was a big bookworm.
You bet. He wasn't just dabbling either. Huge personal library, loved to read, even wrote poetry, plays, though he never got super famous for that.
But the fact that he included a literature prize alongside all the science stuff, that says a lot, doesn't it?
It does. Shows he understood the power of stories, how words shape our world. And think about it. The Nobel Prize in Literature has given a platform to so many writers from all over.
Sharing different perspectives, experiences. Exactly. So much richness and diversity thanks to that one prize.
He seemed to get that science and tech are crucial. But without the humanities, without art, literature, something's missing.
It's about the whole picture, right? Progress isn't just about, gadgets and inventions. It's about empathy, creativity, understanding.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
It really is. Something to think about as we wrap up this part of our deep dive into Alfred Nobel.
Absolutely. So last time we left off with Nobel, this complicated guy, right? But also living in a really, really interesting time. Late 1800s, tons of change happening around him.
Oh, yeah. Massive change. Industrial revolution in full swing, empires all over the place, and, well, things getting kind of tense between countries, militarily speaking.
It sounds a bit like today, actually, when you put it that way. All this tech changing things so fast, global connections, political stuff.
It's uncanny, isn't it? The parallels. But Nobel wasn't just watching this happen. He was part of it,
Yeah.
His inventions were pushing those changes forward.
Right. Like dynamite, for example.
Yeah.
Changed construction, mining, but also could be used for, well, not so peaceful purposes.
Exactly. That double-edged sword of invention, right? It's a dilemma that pops up again and again. Do you think maybe that internal struggle, that awareness of the destructive side of things, maybe that played into his decision to create the Nobel Prizes?
It's a good question. Like, was he trying to, counterbalance things, use his wealth to push for peace, celebrate the good stuff humans do?
Could be. And remember, it wasn't just theoretical for him, this whole destruction thing. His family went through financial hardship early on. And then, of course, there's the tragedy with his brother.
Emil.
Yeah.
Dying in that nitroglycerin explosion. It wasn't some abstract concept for Nobel. He lived through it.
Absolutely. So he's got that personal experience, right? Then he becomes this wealthy guy, sees Europe getting more and more militarized, the arms race heating up, and his inventions, well, they're part of that picture, whether he likes it or not.
Heavy stuff. So maybe he's looking for a way to leave a mark that's different, that goes beyond dynamite, and it's less peaceful uses.
Makes sense. And when you look at those prize categories, peace, literature, all the sciences,
right,
it's like he's focusing on where humanity could really shine,
Yeah. Not just focusing on the material stuff, but also knowledge, creativity, understanding.
It's a very holistic view, isn't it? Progress isn't one-dimensional. And that message, well, it's super relevant today, don't you think?
Big time. Climate change, inequality, all the political division. It's almost like Nobel's life is this challenge to us. What are we going to do with what we know, with the power we have?
Right. Are we going to build something better or just, fall into the same traps as before? It's a big question for all of us. Think about it. What would Alfred Nobel think if he saw the world today? Would he be hopeful? Disappointed?
Yeah. And even more important, what about us? What do we want to leave behind? What can we each do to make things better?
It's a reminder that we're not just passive observers. We all have a part to play. And Nobel, even with all his contradictions, his struggles, he ultimately offers this message of hope. Even someone who creates things that can destroy can also leave a legacy that's about building, about making things better.
That's powerful. And a great note to end on, I think. Alfred Nobel, inventor, philanthropist, a guy who really wrestled with some big questions. His life shows us that progress isn't always neat and tidy, that it's okay to question things, to try to make amends. And if you've been as captivated by Nobel's life as we have, remember to like, share, and subscribe to the All Sorts podcast on YouTube, and follow us on X, Instagram, and Threads for more deep dives into fascinating lives and topics that make you think. There's a whole world of unexpected knowledge out there just waiting to be explored.